Hello, everyone, and welcome to Thorough Newspaper Analysis, which is brought to you by LawSikho. So, today we will be discussing two articles. The first is from The Hindu, which is titled as Being Petroleum Independent. So, this is in context with the price hike that has taken place for petroleum. How India can become petroleum independent and can become energy sufficient by itself has been discussed in this article. And the second one is from the Indian Express, which is titled as Outlines of a Migrant Policy. So this is about the migrant policy, the draft of this policy, which has been discussed upon by Niti Aayog. So what are the requisites that have been taken care of in this policy have been discussed in this article. And thirdly, we have the News and Flash column. So if you're preparing for judicial services examination, you can have a look at the lot of the courses, which is Judiciary Test Prep course of LawSikho. The link to this course is available in the description box below, and from that landing page, you can download free study material for your own help and preparation. Also, we are excelling into our course for CLAT, All India Bar Exam, SEBI, etc. You can have a look at them too. And also, there is the latest edition is from the Limited Insolvency Examination from IBBI. So if you're preparing for this exam, you can have a look at this course as well. So this is the multiple choice question from yesterday's discussion. Section 124A of the Indian Penal Code talks about, your options are criminal conspiracy, sedition, hate speech, or none of the above. You can write down your answer in the comment section below. So this is the descriptive question for the day. How can India become self-sufficient in its energy needs? So with this, let's start a discussion for the first article, which talks about the petroleum independency. So Prime Minister Modi recently emphasized on the need for clean sources of energy and reduce its energy import dependence. Now, as we know that approximately 85% of India's energy needs, like it is for the crude oil, petroleum, diesel, and other energy sources also, India is dependent on the other countries, and it is through imports that we fulfill approximately 85% of our energy needs. So as we know that a lot of energy needs are supplied from Saudi Arabia, Iran, etc. So in this scenario, it is important that India becomes self-sufficient. Now, when we talk about being Atmanirbhar Bharat, that is self-sufficient India or self-reliant India. So in that situation, it is very much important that we pay a lot of attention in making India energy sufficient in itself as well. So this article talks about the various steps that have been taken up in this direction. Firstly, National Electric Mobility Mission Plan, which focused on subsidizing the hybrid electric vehicles. Now, as we know that electric vehicles that depend upon electricity and specifically on lithium-ion batteries, as we know that India also is stepping forward that by the year 2030, at least 30% of our vehicles would be electric vehicles on the road. So here, this policy, which is the National Electric Mobility Mission Plan, now as it is already saying that for the mobilization, for the movement of transportation by means of electric vehicles, would be subsidized in the side of electric vehicles in our country. Secondly, fuel efficiency standards for the passenger cars, the standards are 20% less stringent than the European Union. So which means that the cars that are passenger in nature, that means they carry people from one place to another. So for them, they need to be fuel efficient. Now, for example, the taxis in Delhi and various other states of our country, they have to be mandatorily be running on the CNG, which is the compressed natural gas. So which ultimately makes them more fuel efficient. Now by fuel efficient, we mean that in lesser amount of fuel, they can travel a longer distance and also are not as polluting as the other sources of energy like coal or even the petrol or diesel. So that is why we have to become fuel efficient, and the fuel efficiency standards have to be met by the passenger cars. So the heavy duty vehicles are now subject to these standards. So all other vehicles, like for example the buses in Delhi, also you must have seen. So they also have to make sure that they are in good condition and their engines are not consuming a lot of energy, and that is why it is important to make sure that you have as you know, we have to maintain a pollution card in our cars as well, which shows that our what level of pollution is being caused due to the engine of our particular vehicle. Then we have the national policy on biofuels, which was brought up in 2018. So it talks about the share of bioethanol in petrol rose by 8% in volume. So which means that if we talk about the biofuels, for example, bioethanol, so ethanol is itself a kind of fuel which is produced by the biological sources. Now there are various, like many a times the animal waste, cow dung, etc. These things are used as biological sources of our fuels, like that of bioethanol. So the share or the ingredient nature, or the ingredient part of the bioethanol in petrol has risen by 8% in volume, which is a good sign, and also it is making the use of petroleum more efficient. Then the faster adoption and manufacturing of electric vehicles, which is FAME, it is in short, it is known as FAME, and the second version of it has already begun, which focuses largely on the electric vehicles. So it again talks about the faster adoption and manufacturing of the electric vehicles in the country. So these are the steps that are needed to reduce the petroleum dependence, because as I just mentioned, that India, almost 80 to 85% of its energy needs, we depend on our imports, which we get from various Middle East countries and other countries as well. So these are the steps which should be taken to reduce our dependence for petroleum on the other nations. Firstly, formulate a zero emissions vehicle program. So by zero emissions vehicle program, we mean requiring all manufacturers to start producing electric vehicles across all market segments. Now, as we know that electric vehicles are zero emission vehicles because they are not at all using these carbon fuels or these hydrocarbons like the petroleum or diesel for running their engine. Rather, they use electricity. So by electricity, it can be like stored electricity also, which can be stored into lithium ion batteries as well. So thus, there is no emission of any kind of greenhouse gases. And thus, if at all we have a significant number of these vehicles running on the roads, definitely the requirement for petroleum and other such fuels will reduce. And thus, we can easily have in hand the zero emissions vehicle program. Then strengthen fuel efficiency requirements for new passenger cars and commercial vehicles. Now, a very good example of this is moving from the BS4 kind of engine to BS6 kind of engine. Basically, BS or the Bharat Stage 4, 3, 2, these are the various types of engines which are used in the passenger vehicles and other commercial vehicles. So as and when the upgradation takes place, it makes sure that the engines, the cars, or any kind of vehicles become more fuel efficient. That means that they consume less of these fuels and they emit out lesser greenhouse gases. So India has taken a forward step in this because till date we were using BS4 kinds of engines in our vehicles, but India made a direct jump or a direct leap to BS6 vehicles. So it is being made sure that now all the new vehicles that are coming now up, like for example, if you're buying a new version of any particular car, then that car will have the BS6 kind of engine, which is more fuel efficient and also less polluting in nature. And thus, we need to strengthen our fuel efficiency requirements in this direction. Then the above two by 2024 can result in India's petroleum demands peaking by 2030. So these things, if we're not taking care of these, so by 2024, it can, whatever the petroleum demands, it says that if we do this, so the requirements of our petroleum demands will fall, and the level which we had to reach at by 2024, it can be shifted forward to 2030, which means that lesser amount of petroleum will be consumed if we are able to bring in these policies. So the FAME scheme should be extended to agricultural tractors as well. Now, as we know that India is the largest, it is the country which uses the largest number of tractors and also produces the largest number of tractors, because it is the tractors in India are very extensively used for the agricultural activities, and thus the faster adoption and manufacturing of electric vehicles, this particular scheme should be applied to the agricultural tractors as well, because there is a huge use of these tractors, and if they are made energy efficient and electric, they can run on the electric energy, then definitely a lot of pollution can be stopped, and also the requirement for diesel can be reduced. So you can see that India's crude oil import dependency has risen to 83.7% in April from 77.3% in the financial year 2014. So as you can see, from 2014 till April 2018, it has been consistently rising. And here also, India's major crude oil suppliers are the largest amount of crude oil is supplied from Iraq. Then we have Saudi Arabia, then Iran, UAE, Nigeria, Venezuela, US, and Russia. So this, you can see that we're dependent on a lot of countries for our energy supplies. With this, let's discuss the second article for the day, which talks about the draft migrant policy. So Niti Aayog, which is the official think tank of our country or government of India, it has prepared a draft national migrant labor policy. So what are the features of it? We need to know. Firstly, two approaches to policy design have been adopted, which are rights-based. Now, by rights-based, we mean that they particularly focus on giving the basic rights to all these migrant workers. Firstly, the cash transfers, special quotas, and reservations for the migrant people. For example, we have the direct benefit transfer, and other kinds of cash transfers in the name of various schemes have must take place, so that they have a good, at least a basic income in their hand. And then secondly, special quotas and reservations. By that we mean that if at all a person is belonging to a particular community that is maybe more oppressed, or it is facing, or any particular kind of business that is facing more kind of greater problems, so they should have special quotas and reservations as well. And secondly, enhancing the agency and capability of the community, which means the community building organization. Now by this we mean that it is not just the government that should be doing one sided processes or one sided policies and steps. Rather, community building should take place, which means that as a community, as a whole, as a group of people as well, we should be made to grow. Now this can be done by better coordination and collaboration amongst the people. Like for example, in the villages, in the rural areas, when the idea of self-help groups was brought in, it had completely changed the picture and made people more independent on themselves, independent, and they were quite independent in terms of financial resources as well. So in a similar manner, even for the migrant workers, such community building programs should take place, wherein overall growth can be focused upon. So then this draft national migrant labor policy recommends acknowledgement of migration as integral part of development. Now here, one important thing that has been brought up in this policy is that it is important that firstly we acknowledge, we admit to the fact that migration is an integral part of development. So it is not something that we should be aiming at zero migration at all, because if at all we are aiming at reducing the migration per se, so then it would also reduce the very factor of social mobility. That is, that it will be difficult for the people for moving from one level of the society to another level of the society, and thus migration. But yes, healthy migration is something that we need to acknowledge, and we should know that it is an integral and important part of the developmental processes. Secondly, the government policies to facilitate the internal migration. Now, as we know that migration is of two kinds. Firstly, internal migration, which is within the country. Now, for example, a person from Madhya Pradesh may travel to Delhi for some particular kind of work. A worker from Tamil Nadu may travel to Maharashtra for any kind of work. So that is an internal migration that takes place within the territory of a particular country. And by external migration, we mean, like for example, a lot of people, they move out from India and they migrate and work into various other countries. Like for example, a lot of people work into Saudi Arabia, Iran, Kuwait, etc. So that would be external migration. So here, at least for facilitating the internal migration, the government policies should be brought in. Like for example, the one nation, one ration card theory, or the one nation, one ration card policy, which allows one particular person to make use of his ration card entirely in any corner of the country, is one thing, or one kind of policy that brings the entire market together, and that is why it facilitates the internal migration. So in this scenario, a person who could only avail the benefits of his ration card earlier in his own state and district, now he will be allowed to use it in any state of the entire country. So these are the kinds of government policies which facilitate and which empower the internal migration. Then, institutional mechanism to coordinate between ministries, states, and local department. Definitely, all these institutions, all these authorities should come together and work in a coordinated manner, be it the ministries, the state governments, or the local departments as well. And that is why they should come with an all-encompassing steps that actually facilitate the internal migration in a positive manner. Then maintain database and legal support against potential exploitation. So, which means that we should have the grievance handling cells. Now, these can be at the district levels, at the state level, and even maybe at the national level if required at all. So, this means that many a times when the people, they migrate from one place to another in search of work, many a times they're exploited by their employers, who are their basically contractual or part-time employees. What happens is that maybe the situation that they have to work in is very dingy and it is just not safe for any kind of work, or it may be possible that the return or the wages that they're getting in return are not equitable. Maybe there is a difference between the wage that has been paid to a woman or a man, they are different. So many a times such exploitations also take place, and that is why we should take them in account in the very first instance. And thus we should maintain a complete database as to how many migrant workers do we have, what skills do they possess, how can we further train them. Basically, in a way, the government and authorities they should know the fact that how many migrant workers are there in the country and what is the trend of migration that is taking place in the current scenario. And if we talk about the legal support, then there can be, as we know, that Article 39A of the Indian Constitution provides for the free legal aid to these people, to everyone who is poor or children, women, etc. So, in such a scenario, it should be made practically available to them, and thus legal support against any kind of exploitation, which I just mentioned before, should take place. And finally, the skill building and education in migration destinations. What happens is that the people, for example, there is a couple, both of them work as migrant laborers. Now they have two children. Now, since because of the nature of their work, that since they are migrant laborers, they move from one city to another city, or one place to another, one village to another village. So what happens is that it makes it very difficult for the children of these particular people to study and to learn any skills. And even for these people themselves, the skill building becomes a very hefty task. In such a scenario, such migration destinations that are the hotspots of migrations, for example, as we know that Delhi, Mumbai, and such big cities like Chennai and other big cities that actually absorb a lot of migrant laborers, should have these facilities, be it the schools, the early childhood care, anganwadis, etc., so that the children of these people can also avail the basic right to education, which has been endowed, which has been given to every citizen of the country, every child in the country. And also the skill building programs should take place, so that these laborers can also enhance and upscale their skills in the coming future, so that they can look out for better opportunities in the coming world. Then there is this entire scenario which was given by the report of Working Group on Migration 2017, which said that the movement from agriculture to manufacturing and services was inherently linked to the success of migration in the country. As we know that in any economy, there are basically three most important sectors: the primary sector, secondary sector, and the tertiary sector. So agriculture, if we talk about in the Indian context, so the agriculture is considered to be the primary sector of the economy. The manufacturing, industries, production is considered to be the secondary sector of the economy. And finally, the services like the IT, computers, education, tourism, etc., teaching, these are all considered to be the tertiary sector of the economy. So, in the basic sense, whenever there is the movement of laborers from agriculture to the manufacturing and the services, that is from the primary to the secondary and tertiary sectors of the economy, it is linked to as the success of migration in the country. But here, one thing that we need to note is also that we should also note down and monitor the reasons why people are migrating from the agriculture sector to the other sectors. Is it because that the resources or the the facilities that are available in the agriculture sector are so bad, or they are not in such good shape that people should stick back to it, or there are any other kinds of reasons? Because if at all it is this the reason, the first one that I mentioned, that the agriculture is not able to give them a lot of return, if that is the reason, then the government definitely should pay attention to this kind of migration as well, because agriculture ultimately is very, very important for making specifically countries like India being very self-reliant, because agriculture is the backbone of Indian economy. So definitely, it gives employment to approximately 47% of our entire labor workforce. So that is why it is very important, and thus any such trend should be closely monitored. Then, the limitations of the Interstate Migrant Workers Act 1979 covers only laborers migrating through a contractor, and thus the recommendations are that migrant workers should be integrated with all the workers. Now, all the workers, like any kind of worker who's working in any kind of industry, factory, etc. So there should be a greater scope of their definition, and thus migrant workers should also be included in this very definition. And thus, comprehensive law for the migrant workers should be brought in, so that they are not left out at any particular stage. And we should amend the 1979 Act for effective utilization to protect the migrants. So these are all the important recommendations that have taken place in this direction. With this, let's see what do we have for news and flash today. Firstly, Indradhanush 3.0. The states and the union territories have rolled out the intensified mission Indradhanush 3.0 to cover children and pregnant women who missed routine immunization programs during COVID-19 pandemic. So, only thing that we need to keep in mind here is that the Indradhanush scheme of the government is related to what? So, basically, it is related to the immunization program of the children and pregnant women in various things, like it can be for polio, it can be for hepatitis, it can be for rabies, etc. It can be any kind of immunization program that can take place. And so the campaign is being conducted in 250 pre-identified districts or urban areas in 29 states and union territories. Secondly, Mars missions. So this article basically had a long list of various Mars missions that have taken place till date, and thus we should know that which of these are the Martian missions or the Mars missions. So NASA's Martian rover or the Mars mission, called as Perseverance, has touched down the Martian soil, that is the land of the Mars, after a 6.5 month long journey from the Cape Canaveral. And other missions which were related to Mars are, so in 1971, it was the Soviet Union's Mars 3 lander, which became the first spacecraft to safely land on the planet Mars. And also, 2018, NASA also had its InSight lander, which was again a Mars mission. Apart from these, as we know, that the Hope mission also from UAE is another Mars mission, and the Tianwen 1 from China is also an important Mars mission. So that was all for the day. We hope it was a good session for you. Please stay tuned with Losico for such more sessions to come. And if you want to download the PDF of today's slides, you can find the link in the description box and join a Telegram group. Also, do join and subscribe to our other channel called as the CLAT Prep for other updates on current affairs and other daily quizzes to come in the coming future. Thank you so much.